We awoke the next day to a bright, placid morning sky. Out of the blue, Hijikata-san summoned everyone for a meeting, projecting his voice loudly to all of his men.
そろそろ江戸にとどまるのも限界みてえだな。
限界というのは？
今江戸城にいるお偉いさん方は戦う気をまるっきりなくしちまってる。ここでくすぶって戦の機会を逃すより、戦う意志が残ってる連中と合流する方がまだ勝ち目がありそうだ。
ということは会津に行くのですね。
ああ、伝習隊に幕府回転隊、幕府遊撃隊、会津藩に桑名藩。薩長のやり口が気に食わねえって奴らはいくらでもいる。そうだよな、近藤さん。
Hijikata-san called out to Kondo-san, who In fact, it seemed as though Hijikata-san's spirited declaration was particularly falling on deaf ears.
近藤さん、聞こえてるか?
Once more, Hijikata-san called out to Kondo-san, who finally looked up after festering in his wistful mood. His response, however, was... Yeah, kinda not the response we need out of a leader at this very moment. Kondo-san's delivery was half-hearted at best. He wallowed in his forlorn expressions, aiming his dejected murmurs for Hijikata-san, although they could have been for anyone, given how detached they felt.
トシ、会津には俺も行かなきゃならんのか
な。当たり前じゃねえか。新選組を引っ張っていく人間はあんた以外いねえだろ。大丈夫だって。負け戦なんてそう続くもんじゃねえよ。
Hijikata-san did his best to comfort Kondo-san, who seemed to sink deeper and deeper into his depression. But it was a futile effort.
どういう段取りを踏むつもりなんだ。会津って結構遠いけど。
流山に松本先生の知り合いの家があってな、そこをひとまずの拠点にするつもりだ。で、ここにある武器や一般の大使、羅刹隊を少しずつそこに移動させていく。
なるほど。まあいきなり何もかも会津に運び込むのは無理だもんな。
Saito-san, who had been observing us wordlessly from the corner, suddenly spoke up.
副長、千駄ヶ谷にいる宗司は？
この間、近藤さんと一緒に見舞いに行ってみたんだが、とても刀を握れる状態じゃねえな。残念だが、江戸に置いていくしかね
え。そうですか。
After Hijikata-san revealed the bad news, Saito-san politely answered with his usual stoic tone. But even so, it was plain to see that Saito-san was disappointed. Both he and Okita had worked alongside each other as friends, no less, since the Shie Hall days. I was confident that Saito-san would have felt far more comfortable fighting alongside his old comrade. Just then.
新選組の剣としてあれだけの働きをしてくれた沖田君でさえ、足手まといとなれば切り捨てられてしまうということですか。我々もいつ見捨てられるか分かったものではないですね。
Sanan-san's demeanor was plentifully as ever, but his icy joke was enough to stop everyone in the room.
悪い冗談は大概にしてくれ。俺がいつあんた方を見捨てるなんて言ったんだ。
言っているも同然では。行動さんが持っている落ち水があれば羅刹隊をさらに強化できるかもしれないというのに。
あんたともあろう人が何言ってやがる。 今の行動さんが俺たちなんぞと交渉したがるはずねえだろうが。
話の運び方次第では。
さあんた。
A fiery contempt burned in Hichikata-san's eyes as he shot Sanan-san a stern look in response to his implicit question. But Sanan-san maintained his cold composure, seemingly unfazed by Hichikata-san's hateful ire.
ただの冗談ですよ。こんなざれ言に目くじらを立てるとは、君も随分余裕をなくしているようですね。
冗談なら時と場所を選んでほしいもんだがな。
Things were left unsettled as the meeting was disbanded. But was Sanan-san truly joking? Was this question just an attempt to mess with Hichikata-san, or was this a possibility he had silently entertained? These thoughts were sifted back and forth in my head well into the night's end. As soon as Hichikata-san gave the official order to depart for Aizu, the headquarters became abuzz with activity. However, being short-handed as far as leadership figures were concerned meant that we were stretched quite thin with delegating important tasks. One captain in particular felt the brunt of it all. Saito-san, is everything okay? There's practically no color in your face.
大事ない。
Why don't you take a moment to rest? I know that you were working pretty late into the night yesterday evening.
会津行きの支度を早急に済ませなければならない。休んでいる暇などあるはずがない。
Saito-san's face was a pale, sunken mess. So gaunt, I was certain he was about to pass out from exhaustion. But don't you think that you collapsing would defeat the purpose of all the effort you're putting in? I think at the very least you should find time to rest during the daytime, if you insist on staying up late.
確かに昼起きているのは疲れるが、それでも人間だった頃よりマシな働きはできているはずだ。
That's not the point. Saito-san hadn't changed. He was so unbelievably stubborn when it came to practicing self-care. The fact of the matter is, whether or not he was able to work beyond human capabilities was irrelevant. What was relevant was that Saito-san was made to suffer this painful affliction, and he simply endured it. I was beginning to ask myself if Saito-san had fallen under the delusion that his body was as replaceable as his sword or his armor. I pursed my lips in thought as I stared at him.
それに俺が働くのをやめてしまえば新選組はなんでもない。
Saito-san cut himself short, falling conspicuously silent. Just then. And we have found round 3. He let out a distressed groan. Then Saito-san began to sway where he stood. Saito-san, are you okay? I hastily rushed to his side, supporting what was becoming dead weight as I frantically called to him. Saito-san's full, supple lips were becoming pale, and his breathing became ragged as he gasped for air. Are you okay? Just hold on!
すまない。ぶしつけな真似をしてしまったな。
He offered his frail hand, hoping to use my body as leverage to lift himself back to his feet. But he became powerless, and neither his legs nor his arms had any strength in them enough to move. Don't strain yourself. Why don't you give yourself a moment to lie down? I'll prepare your bedding in the next room. Saito-san shook his head.
平気だ。このままじっとしていれば治る。
As always, Saito-san was adamant about declining. All I wanted was for him to rest, but alas, there was no convincing him. His affliction, however, did not wait for him to decide. After a brilliant flash, Saito-san's hair turned white. My inclination turned out to be true. Saito-san was transforming into a fury. From what I remember, his fatigue and stress would slowly melt away were he able to drink blood. And say with me now, give him blood. It was a bit of a gamble, to be sure, to try this option in hopes of improving his physical condition, but this was all I could do for him. Saito-san, please, drink my blood. As my command fell onto his ears, Saito's shoulders twitched. The Shinsengumi's not in the best shape right now, right? That means we need you more than ever. Saito-san pressed himself against me as his breathing became a labored wheeze. Without a second thought, I unsheathed my kodachi and I sliced a tiny cut into my earlobe. Small hot droplets of blood came oozing out. Everything will be okay. When you drink blood, I'm sure you will feel better in no time. I calmly wrapped my arms around Saito-san's body, and I nuzzled my burning earlobe against his soft lips. His tongue was gentle but eager, and I felt a chill run down my neck as his mouth wrapped around my cut. His ragged breath tickled my ears. Without saying a word, Saito-san sipped the blood. The frequency of his warm, staggered breath began to slow itself. This alone made me feel relief. Just being able to ease Saito-san's suffering, even if it were just a little. As I sighed in relief, I had sensed that something was amiss. The cut I just made had already healed. And yet Saito-san's lips and tongue were still suckling gently at my ear. Saito-san, I think the cut's already closed up. After I timidly expressed my observations, Saito-san's fingertips, which had only moments earlier stroked my hair, twitched awkwardly. Oh, was that not enough blood? Do you want me to make another cut? Once again, I asked him. Saito-san hurriedly got to his feet with such aplomb, and it felt as though he were pushing me away. What's the matter?
すまない。
Saito-san stood impetuously, and for some reason he looked shaken. What would you like me to do? Should I cut my ear again?
いや、別に飲み足りなかったわけではない。
Really? Just tell me. If it wasn't enough for you, you don't have to hesitate to ask, okay?
ああ。
What had gotten into him? Just then, his mood had shifted completely. However, color had filled out his complexion again, so maybe I don't have to worry? And we in Nagarayama yet? April 1st. Jesus Christ. April 1st. Our group had been transferred to a sake brewery situated in the Nagaoka Mansion in Nagarayama. Saito-san was occupied with the bustling scene, ordering warriors around and helping with the unpacking. Saito-san, how are you feeling?
平気だ。同じ過ちは二度は繰り返さん。
Are you sure?
どういう意味だそれは。俺が嘘を言っているとでも言うのか。
It's not the fact that you lie, it's just the fact that you don't ask. Saito-san, I don't know how to tell you this, but you aren't the best at taking care of your body. So I'm a little worried that you may push yourself too hard again, and that you could faint again.
シンパチや佐野が抜け、宗司も肺の病で起き上がれぬに。局長や副長のご負担は以前よりも増しているはずだ。
Then why don't you ask Soma or Nomura?
俺にしかできん役目がいくつもある。休むわけにはいくまい。
I understand where you're coming from, Saito-san, but you must find time to rest, or you won't be able to work as hard as you want to. And if that were to happen, then it would be an even heavier burden on Kondo-san and Hijikata-san. Perhaps I was being a tad too forward with my argument, but if I hadn't been as forceful or forward, I doubt that Saito-san would have paid my words any heed.
あんたは見た目に似合わず強情なのだな。何故俺などの世話を焼きたがる。
Well, how should I respond? I don't have a reason. I don't have a reason. I'm just really worried about you, Saito-san. After all, my father was a doctor.
いらぬ世話だ。俺よりももっと気にかけるべき相手はいるだろう。
Well, it's you I'm worried about, more than anyone else at the moment. And it's because you keep pushing yourself and making all of us worry about you. Ever since you became a Fury, you've been working day and night. Anyone could see that it has been wearing you down, but you keep insisting you're fine. I think you're only worrying everyone else around you more than you think. Saito-san took in my words carefully, and he cast his gaze towards the ground.
確かにあんたの言う通りかもしれんな。いらぬ世話とは口が過ぎたかもしれん。すまなかった。ひとまずあんたの言う通り、今日の夜は休養を取ることにする。
Wait a minute, you aren't going to rest now?
この書類を書かねばならん。やりかけの仕事を残して休むのはどうにも落ち着かぬ。
Hearing that he was refusing yet again to rest almost made me lose all the power in my body. I thought I could faint at any moment. Don't Furies normally feel better when they rest during the day and act during the nighttime? So what do you think it's better if you rest now and then continue to work when the sun's down?
休めというあんたの言葉には従うのだから十分だろう。
Saito! At this rate, it seemed there would be no convincing him to sleep until the evening. Rather, I had a suspicion that he would sneak around and work until the sun rose once more. So I marched up to his desk and I gathered all of the parchment and the documents that he had been working on. Fine then, have it your way. I'm going to ask Kondo-san to write all of these documents.
何？バカなことを言うな。局長の手を煩わせるほどの仕事ではない。
It's not like that at all. Kondo-san has also expressed concern about your well-being. If I tell him that it's time for Saito-san to take a break, then I'm sure he will understand and carry on whatever needs to be done.
そういうことを言っているのではない。局長にそんな雑務をさせるわけにはいかぬと言っているのだ。おとなしくその書類を返せ、雪村。
No. No, you promised me that you'd rest today. warrior does not go back on his promises, right? At last, Saito-san had no witty refutation to offer. He sighed heavily and his shoulders dropped in defeat.
あんたは花から俺の言うことなど聞くつもりはないのだな。わかった。好きにするといい。
Don't say it that way. Jesus. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to make your bed immediately. I darted out of the room, preparing Sato-san's bed before he had a chance to change his mind.
それで、あんたはいつまでここにいるつもりだ。
Until you rest. I'm afraid that the moment I leave your room, you're going to get right back up and continue working.
この通り寝る支度をした。途中まで手をつけていた仕事も局長にお任せすることにした。ここまでさせておいて、あんたはまだ俺のことを信用できぬというのか。
I'm sorry. It's just that I'm that worried about you.
まったく。
A look of confusion was stretched across Saito-san's face, causing him to slump disappointedly, but I could see a smirk beginning to form in the curl of his pink lips. Saito-san plopped atop the futon and he lifted the duvet over his body, letting his legs bury underneath them. Oh. As I watched him ready himself for sleep, something familiar came to mind.
どうした？
Oh, nothing. I was just reminded of something.
あることというのは？
It was a dream I had. A few years ago, I came down with a terrible cold and was bedridden, but in my dream, you held my hand. Is something wrong, Sato-san? Your face is flushed red.
いや、まさかあんたがあの時のことを覚えているとは。
Wait, what? Don't tell me. Saito-san's eyes were hastily averted from my own.
決して体があったわけではない。あんたが風邪で寝込んでいると副長からお聞きしたから様子を見に行っただけだ。
I know that. I just wanted to say I'm glad it wasn't a dream.
よかったというのは。
You have no idea how much it meant when you held my hand that night, Saito-san.
そうか。
Saito-san's body shrunk as I spoke, perhaps as a show of discomfort. Saito-san?
なんだ。
May I hold your hand?
手をだと。何故俺はわらべではないぞ。
Hey, I'm not trying to treat you like a child. But when your hand embraced mine all those nights ago, I felt so at peace. So I was hoping I could return the favor and make you feel some sense of calm as well. Is that not okay with you?
雪村。
A calculated look was aimed towards me by Saito-san, as if he were hoping to read my emotions, my motive, not emotions, but also motives. He moved his gaze awkwardly away from me, but his hand was outstretched in my direction. I smiled, grasping his hand gently just as he did mine on that distant wintry night. Having the two of us here together really brings back the memories, doesn't it? Well, maybe not exactly, as I suppose you and I have swapped places.
そうだな。
He clasped onto my hand in return, but I noticed he seemed distracted, like something was pulling his heart somewhere miles away from here.
あの時はシンパチもサノもいた。宗司も肺を病んではいたが、起き上がれぬほどではなかった。源さんも山崎も元気だった。平助も俺も羅刹にはなっていなかった。
Memories of Kyo came flooding back to me, leaving a bittersweet taste in my mouth as I recounted them. Back then, there were still plenty of challenges that everyone faced, but even so, we faced them together and we thrived. But now,
あんただけは変わらんな。
what?
あの時も今も変わらず俺の後ろをついてきて、何かあるとすぐに俺の名を呼ぶ。それだけは昔も今も変わらん。
Come to think of it, you're right. Thinking about how long we had known each other, all the moments gathering in the glass of our friendship, made me smile.
だが、それもいつまでなのかはわからんな。あんたは最後まで我々に付き合う義理などあるまい。
No. I will always remain by everyone's side. Besides, I have nowhere else to call home. I realized that, with Father becoming an agent of the demons, there really is nowhere else I can go. My heart sank heavily in my chest, thinking about how what I'd regarded as family for so long was not just a ghost of a thought. So here was where I belong. Saito-san scanned me with inquisitive eyes, perhaps on the cusp of saying something in response. Then, after a long pause, he opened his mouth.
他に行き場所がないか。俺に似ているな。
His words weren't necessarily directed at me, but rather he was murmuring under his breath.